This is the Sales Babble Podcast, episode 198, The Birth of a Salesman, an interview with Carson Heady.
Welcome to Sales Babble, the podcast that shares selling secrets for non-sellers. And now your host, Pat Helmers.
Hello, Sales Babblers. This is Pat Helmers. And before I get started, I'd like to do a shout out to Aditya, Vic, Jagadesh, Edward, Trish, and Richard, all who have reached out to me in the last week or so to share how much they appreciate Sales Babble. It's been great getting to know these people, and a few I've chatted with at length on the phone. It's been great picking their brains on what they like about the podcast and things that we can do to make it better. But the one consistent message I got from the audience was that they love that Sales Babbles makes sales simple, and they love the practical selling stories. Well, today we're going to knock that out of the park. Our guest is sales professional and author Carson Heady. Carson authored a book series called The Birth of a Salesman, and he spins a tale of sales adventures with the fictional character, Vincent Scott. Vincent's all about passion, personality, tenacity, endurance, and toughness. That's what makes for great sales, and it's the foundation of his character. So, with no further ado, let's get to it. Welcome, Carson. Are you ready to babble?
Yes, I am.
Carson, you're from St. Louis, which is a city I love dearly.
St. Louis is a wonderful city, yes. I've lived here for 16 years now.
Yeah, my youngest son used to live there, and we just fell in love with the beer culture, and it was so easy going to Busch Stadium, and there was the market, the farmer's market, and the restaurants. Just a terrific village.
Yeah, there's a lot to do. It's amazing, especially at the different phases of my life. You know, when I first moved here, I was right out of college. I was young and single, no kids. And then, now to be in a completely different state in my life where I have 2 kids and a wife and a lot less time on my hands. It's just, it offers a lot in different experiences, whether you're young or old. So, yep. I don't foresee moving anytime soon.
Yep. Well, the reason I got you on the podcast here is that you have a new book out.
Yeah, so recently I released the anthology of my prior works and kind of did a special edition, kind of an update, which really reflected a lot of my changes in thought and perspective on selling over the last decade or so.
I'm looking at it right here. It's called The Birth of a Salesman by Carson V. Heady.
That's the one. So, the original Birth of a Salesman came out in 2010, and then the sequels were in 2014 and 2016. And then I looked at it, Pat, and it's amazing, and I know you can speak to this too. You look at your selling perspective from when you were in your 20s or 30s, and you start to say, hey, I feel really differently about a lot of these things, and I felt it kind of merited an update. And I also thought, I was like, hey, let's kind of put some of this stuff together and weave together some more symmetries, and so I just thought it'd be really cool to put together just kind of a collection, and that's what I did. I added some new material, and kind of went back and let's call it akin to George Lucas's special editions of Star Wars. I added in a few things here or there, and there it was. It took a lot of work, but it's something I kind of worked on over the last couple of years, and then came out this year, and it's really been a fun ride.
But this isn't like the next Challenger sale or spin selling. This is a book of fiction, right?
Those have been done very well, and I didn't want to really compete in that space, while at the same time, I felt like I did want to share a lot of sales lessons. But no, it is. It's a work of fiction. It's basically a book inside a book. It's a sales book embedded within a fictional novel about a character that I created who goes through a lot of these experiences and learns these lessons, and then he writes a book about it. So a lot of it's back and forth, where you have a chapter that he wrote in his book, and then you go to where in his career he learned that lesson.
So why don't you tell us about this person?
Yeah, so his name is Vincent Scott. He is he had a very meteoric rise within his career, but he's young and he's brash. And he goes through a lot of the same things that we go through. You know, he has good managers, he has not so good managers. A lot goes through a lot of change, and not only his career, but also in his personal life. And but he learns a lot of lessons in the selling realm, and learns how to apply them, and makes a lot of mistakes too. And I think that's where he learns probably some of the more impactful lessons throughout his career. But I like to call him Superman with a briefcase. I mean, this guy, he's hardworking, he's very diligent and passionate, but at the same time, he takes some missteps. He's not afraid to make risks. Some of them are not as calculated and probably plotted out as they should be, and sometimes the guy falls flat on his face. But at the end of the day, he goes to the mat for his clients and for his employees, and has a really big rise within his organization, and he runs into some conflict and uncovers some not so nice elements of the corporate bureaucracy, and the book is about how he handles it.
Where did Vincent Scott come from?
I think there's a little bit of Vincent Scott in all of us. He came a lot from different experiences that happen to us in the corporate world. He started out in selling right out of college, didn't really know if it'd be something that would be a good fit, but the money was good, and it was a gig. It was something that got him out of just doing small time grocery store work, and that he did not envision a future in, and he was just working part time. So got him out of that and got him into the workforce, made more money than he'd ever encountered, and found out he was actually pretty good at it. And, he spent time invested in being the best sales rep that he could be, and then was promoted. Then he was promoted again. And so I think who he is he's a mix of a lot of people that that I've come into contact with over the last several years, and just different best practices and things like that I've seen and pulled from, and just some you try to incorporate anytime you're writing anything. I mean, they say you write what you know, so obviously I've incorporated a lot of those types of experiences into the Vincent Scott story. But he could be anybody, and that's the beauty of it.
What's the challenge he bumps into? What's the troubles and the moral dilemma that he's got to face?
Sometimes in the corporate world, and in any world for that matter, you run against you might run up against some unscrupulous folks. You might run into some injustices and situations where your people are not being treated fairly or not being paid properly. So he runs into a lot of these types of scenarios where he has to ask himself, am I going to play the game? Am I going to be a yes man, or am I going to fight back against some of these injustices? And frankly, this guy does everything that you or I would probably want to do if there were no repercussions. He does them, and it really kind of explores where those decisions take him. So the dilemmas are nothing out of the ordinary of the a lot of the things that we see in a corporate culture, or have seen in corporate cultures. But at the same time, there are some things that pop up in dealing with some of the unscrupulous folks, and there's some things that happen to him that are unfair, and it's all about how he reacts and responds. And then as the story progresses, because again, there are 3 of these stories right now, and I maybe someday a 4th, it's all about the evolution of the character, because he deals with very similar circumstances in books 2 and 3, but he handles them based on the experiences that he had in book 1. So just to see this guy's journey, the story starts when he's in his teens and late teens, early 20s, and it takes him all the way up till almost 40 in the most recent one. So obviously there's a lot of different conflicts and dilemmas that you can face, but I think the crux of it is seeing things that he disagrees with in the corporate culture, where his clients and his employees are not benefiting from some of these things that are transpiring, and it's what he does to try to make good there.
See, I have these fantasies. Let me share these with you, Carson, where you bump into some injustice, and you bump into something where you just know it's wrong, and you just want to tell them off, and you have these little conversations going on in your head, and how you're going to get that last word. And then the music's going to rise, and you're going to walk off to the west. It never happens. I always back down, right? I'm always I don't want to burn any bridges. oh, what do you really get out of that? Right? You don't really get anything out of that. You're not going to change their mind. The world's not going to know. You're not going to win an award for that. You're just setting yourself up for, but I always want to have this Hollywood moment where I walk off and everybody claps. Pat, he did it. He said it. Damn, he's a hero.
Did you read my journal? Because I think I wrote about that dream that I had last night.
Really? Maybe everybody has this. I've been having this dream for years. I'm like, you want to tell these people off? I want to have victory in the end.
Yeah, I think we all.
Is that what happens in these books?
Yeah, a little
Vincent,
bit.
Was he able to get these Hollywood moments?
I'd like to think so, yes. And I think that he didn't get the Hollywood moments, though, that he anticipated. And that's what reality is. We have these visions of, hey, I'd love to do this, and I think I can make a difference in this way. And, there was a time in this guy's younger, dumber days where, he probably thought that he was bringing so much value to the business that he could leverage that in order to will his way to get what he needed or wanted for his team, in some of these situations. But, for every time that he went to the mat for them, he suffered a little bit. And, in the end, I mean, he really realized a lot of where standing up for, and fighting every single battle takes its toll in a lot of ways. So, I think that he ended up getting some Hollywood moments, but probably not in the way that he anticipates. And, I think that's the reality. We make decisions and, we stand up and we be counted and we do what we think's right, by the needs of the many. And, at the end of the day, we don't always get the outcome that we either anticipated or felt like we deserved. And, it's what we do with that I think really defines us. And I think that's what defines him. He evolves substantially, and as we all do, because, I handle my business and my career so differently now than I did 10, heck, even 5 years ago. And, I think so his journey really mirrors our own when it comes to lessons and evolution.
Has he wronged people?
He has not. I think that
that's what he needs to do next.
Is that right?
Hubris, right? He needs to I'm so good, I can't do wrong.
Yeah, and I think that's the key thing with him is that he realizes his shortcomings. But and I think it's paramount that we all do, right? I mean, that we know what we're good at, what we're not so good at, and we're always working to become a more perfect union, right? But I think that's his thing is that he's typically, at least especially from an ethical standpoint, because there are always ethical questions in selling, from an ethical standpoint, and from a doing right by people that are in his circle of influence. He sides with them every time. Sometimes he goes about it in a misguided way.
What makes him a powerful sales professional? Something that listeners can embrace. Yeah,
the most important things in selling are really passion, for yourself, for your solution, and I think the personality, the ability to really win the crowd and win people over, and the tenacity, endurance is the number one most coveted. I would say, in my opinion, the most coveted aspect of a salesperson, because you're going to be knocked down multiple times. I don't care how good a salesperson you are. You're not going to get a yes every time out of the chute. There are going to be tough sales situations where you lose, and it's completely out of your control. But that ability to control what you can control, and the ability to utilize those scenarios to your advantage, and I really feel like it harks back to one of my favorite movies ever is The Color of Money, and there's a line in there that says for good players, luck itself is an art. And I think we create our own luck in selling. But it's all about relationships, and it's the ability to continue evolving and be open-minded, because you never know where that best practice or that sales nugget is going to come from that's going to take you to the next level. And I think those are the things that he possesses. Obviously, there are some things that he does to his own detriment, and he's definitely his own worst enemy in certain cases. But I think those are the key pieces, and why those are the aspects that we all strive for.
Are you Vincent Scott?
I've been asked that a few times. I think there are definitely some things where I see similarities. We both have blonde hair, but there are probably a few other similarities there too. But
I've seen your picture. You're very handsome. Is Vincent very handsome?
I envision him to be, sure. Hopefully one day when we talk about movie rights with some agent, we can figure out who's going to play him, and I can answer that better. But he's we definitely have some similarities.
What are the differences?
That's a great question. Nobody's ever asked me that one, Pat. What are the differences? I think he's got a little bit more gumption than I do.
I love it. I had a feeling it was going to be a little answer like that.
Yeah, I know where you're going with that. No, I think he's got a little bit more gumption.
That's something we can all work on. But I think it's so cool that you said something. Like, if I had a nickel for every time I heard it's all about relationships, which is true. But I liked what you said. No, it's just as much about tenacity.
Oh, 100%. I mean, you can be the best networker. You can do everything right, but you're going to get smacked down at some point by a no or by something that's totally out of your control.
Yep.
What are you going to do after that? And I'll tell you, and I'm not going to give any spoilers to Birth of a Salesman, but there are some tough losses. And I mean, this guy deals with some stuff, and I like the way that he handles some of these setbacks, and not all of them, but some of them. And I think that's the key piece. Relationships, absolutely huge piece of selling. And what's funny is when I was in my 20s, I didn't see that as much, because I spent a lot of my time in a cold calling, one call close type of an environment. And as I got older, I spent more time in outside and relationship selling and scenarios. And so I think that really lends to the total 180 that my thought process took on relationship selling. I thought that because there are some sales roles where you can do it without that sturdy relationship. You don't have the time to develop it for a myriad of reasons. But, at the end of the day, relationships are huge, but endurance is what's going to ensure that you have long-term success, because you're going to go through so many changes. It's not common nowadays to spend your entire career, especially in sales, with one organization. There's a variety of reasons for that.
That's
I mean,
right.
We could have a whole separate conversation just about that. But there's a lot of times where you can do everything right, still lose, and it's what you do with that is really going to define your selling career.
What's one hook you can leave us with that'll make people want to buy this book?
Just one, huh? The hook is this. My mom told me, and she has zero interest in selling, but obviously she has interest in my well-being. But she read my book, and she's read all three of them. And she told me, she's like, Carson, I don't understand how anybody could read your book and not know how to sell afterward. So I take that as high praise, because especially from my mom, who really has no inclination towards selling. Well, I guess that's not true. She was a teacher for a long time, and teaching is all selling, because you've got to sell a lot of kids to do stick to task and stick to curriculum. So that's actually probably one of the greatest sales jobs in the world. But I think the hook is this. It's very. I try to be very candid. I try to be very blunt, but not to the point where it's audacious, or to the point where it's not constructive, and real examples. There's a lot of sales books out there, and there's a lot of times where it's a lot of philosophy, and it's a lot of you should do this and try this. There are actual real scripts in the book. There are real scenarios and what you should say in certain situations, whether it's prospecting, you getting past the gatekeeper, how you should come up with your fact finding. So I feel like it touches on everything, but it also has a story about somebody that you can relate to.
I love it. Carson, how can people find this book, and how can they find you?
Great questions, and I would love to be found. So the book is at Barnes & Noble. It's also on Amazon. In fact, the recent ebook was just released on Amazon. There's also a audiobook on Amazon for Amazon MP3. And as far as finding me, I'm on LinkedIn feverishly, also on Twitter pretty substantially, and I've got a blog on WordPress.
What's the blog called?
The Life and Times of Carson V. Heady. Bad name, but at the time I came up with it, it was just all I could think about. So,
well, sounds like a pretty heady subject.
Yeah.
You've probably never heard that one.
Well
before.
done.
you probably hear that every time.
I don't, Pat. I mean, you're taking this in a totally unique direction, and I love it. I've had some, one of the things that writing this book has afforded me, and I want to say, if there's anybody out there who even has thought about, just kind of putting pen to paper and writing all this stuff down and making a book, or even just blogging, I encourage you to do it, because the conversations that it opens up are just incredible. I've been able to talk to people all over the world about these types of topics, and just have really thought-provoking conversations about selling and our just different industries, and it's incredible. And I think that for me has been great. But I mean, I'll tell you, this has been a very unique, not remotely cookie cutter experience. I enjoy the dialogue, and you've asked me questions that nobody ever has, so I like that.
Terrific. All right, Carson. Well, thank you very much for visiting us here on Sales Babble. It's been great.
My absolute pleasure, Pat.
It's been a heady experience.
I like that. That should be our tagline. You know what? That may be my next book tagline. For the most heady experience in selling.
I had a lot of fun talking to Carson, as you can tell. I think we did more laughing than chatting. But I've always been a sucker for fiction and business. Glenn Ross, I talk about all the time here on Sales Babble. Wolf of Wall Street, Executive Suite, the old 50s movie, Boiler Room, and then of course there's TV shows that I've been following, like *Halt and Catch Fire* and *Silicon Valley*. All of these fictional places that do such a great job of telling the truth about business, I can't get enough of. So I hope maybe you found value in listening to this podcast and in Carson's book. You can find links to his book in the show notes at www.salesbabble.com/198, as well as our back catalog and archives regarding prospecting and cold calling and presenting and closing and all things sales. If you have a question, have a comment, just like the people that I mentioned at the top of the show, click the Babble Me button on Sales Babble and ask me a question. Thanks for listening, folks. I really appreciate it. Until next week, take care and have a highly successful selling day.
Thank you for listening to the Sales Babble podcast. Find us at www.salesbabble.com.